So we start in chapter 13, which starts with one of the most unclear verses in the Bible. Just a second, my camera was... Yeah. Yeah. One of the most unclear verses in the Bible. I mean, there are many of them, but this one is a little bit strange. Let's read. I will read in Hebrew, and then the translation here is already one of the interpretations. So it says, Ben Shana Shaul b'molcho. Literally translated in Hebrew, Shaul was 1 year old when he became king, which doesn't make a lot of sense, right? What does it mean? Ben Shana. Ben Shana is 1 year old. And we know that he had already grown up children. So, no, Shaul wasn't 1 year old when he was king, right? Doesn't make any sense. You can see here in the English translation, Shaul was 3 years old. This is one of the interpretations that we're going to touch soon. I just want to also read the second part of the verse, Ushte shanim malach al Yisrael. And he reigned over Israel 2 years, which is also doesn't make sense, even though not as the first question or the first part of the verse, but it still looks like the thing that happened in the days of Shaul took several years, for say the least. We talked about maybe 30 years, 40 years. It didn't happen in 2 years. It didn't, all the stories. The problem with that is it's a very regular formula in the Bible in Sefer Melachim. In Sefer Melachim, Kings, when it speaks about the different kings of Am Israel, it always says, this is like the regular formula to summarize the life of the king, usually in the beginning of the story about him. It says, for example, this king was 20 years old and he reigned over Israel for 20 years, right? So it's a very regular formula, which means very clearly what age did the king start being a king, and how long did he reign over Israel. So the two parts of the verse here are very hard to understand. And of course, there are several interpretations for that. The first interpretation that I would say from Chazal, from the sages, is symbolic one, not literal one. Says, Ben Shana, he was as a 1 year old in terms of an innocent person that didn't make any kind of sin. We've seen similar things like that about Sarai. Sarai says she was 127. And why 100 years and 20 years and 7 years? So why to say years each time? What does the verse say in Parashat Chayei Sarah? To tell you that she was like 100 years, like 20 years old. When she was 20, she was innocent as a 7 years old. What?
I thought that was the door, but Alan said no, it's not.
Yeah, okay. So according to that, he wasn't really 1 year old. He was as 1 year old, in the meaning that he was an innocent person or a righteous person that never committed any kind of sin, which is going to change in this chapter. So this is maybe the symbolic interpretation. And then Rashi add another one, and others say, you're not saying about how long he was a king, what age he was when he became a king. It says in the first year of the kingdom of Shaul, meaning the story that we are going to read in this chapter is in the first year of the kingdom of Shaul. Again, it's not very literal what it says. So there is another interpretation here, and this is what the translation here is alluding. And you can see the letter A here, there is interpretation. The number is lacking in the Hebrew text. Meaning it doesn't say Ben Shana, 1 year. So it said Ben X Shana, years. He was X years old, and it's lacking the year. So again, it's a question why not to write the year. Ben he was X years old. Why to say it in this way? The number is lacking in the Hebrew text. Also, the precise context of the 2 years is uncertain. Like we said, it was more than 2 years. The verse is lacking in the Septuagint. How do you read this word? Septin. It's a translation to Greek. Okay, never mind. The translation to the Greek. So according to this interpretation, it says X years old. How X? So some says Ben is actually a number, 52 years old. He was 52 years old. But then again, a word is missing in Ben Shana. He was 52 years old. And I read another explanation to that, which may be true. It's come to diminish the kingdom of Shaul, like to mock, I don't know if mock, but underestimate it. And it's related to something that we are going to see later in the chapter, that the question is if Shaul was supposed to be the king from the beginning, or for how long he's supposed to be the king, forever or not forever. So there are several examples like that in the Bible. When the Bible wants to diminish someone, it says in purpose, in a wrong way, things about him, about his name, or about his years, etc. For example, the son of Shaul, one of the sons of Shaul, Ishbosheth, that was king, the Tanakh always like mispronouncing his name. Not misgender, mispronouncing, like calling him in the wrong name, or not mentioning his name, or only calling him the son of Shaul, and all of that to diminish, because he wasn't really the king. He was controlled by the minister of army. Today you say security, national security officer, right? So he wasn't really a king. He was a puppet, right? He was under the control of the army. Anyway, so according to that, it's starting alluding to what we are going to read in the next chapter, that Shaul wasn't really supposed to be a king, or his kingdom wasn't really a good one. Even though we saw the success in the beginning, we saw that he was a righteous person, like Chachamim said that he was a righteous person, but he wasn't the right person to be a king. Also about what does it mean 2 years, like we said before, it was at least 20, 30 years that he was a king. So some explain that he was a king, he was like legitimate king 2 years until David was named also as a king. It was a long time when both of them were kings in some way. So David was hiding and running away, and Shaul was a king. But it was 2 years when he was a good king. Or another explanation, what we are going to read this story is in the first and second years of his kingdom. Anyway, returning to, let's continue with the stories. There are, again, a verse that it's not very clear literally what does it mean, because Saul wasn't 1 year old and he reigned on Israel more than 2 years. Now, the last thing that we saw, the last chapter, was that Shaul, or 2 chapters ago, that Shaul was able to defeat the Ammonim, and everybody was accepted him as a king. Now, a king need an army, but the formula of an army, or the way the army was constructed in the old time, was basically based on reservists, meaning people that had maybe the weapon in the house, they were working, living normally, and when there was a war, they were called to the army, right? It wasn't like regular army. The regular army usually is a very small one. And this makes sense. What is said in the second verse, Shaul picked 30,000 Israelites, of whom 2,000 were with Shaul in Michmash and in the hill country of Bethel, and 1,000 with Jonathan in Gibeah of Benjamin. The rest of the troops is sent back to their homes. So here, it looks a little bit, the way it's written, 1,000 were in Michmash and in hill country. So it's 2 different places. Where were they? In Michmash or the hill country? So it makes sense to say that there were 1,000 in Michmash and 1,000 in Bethel, and another 1,000 in Gibeah and Binyamin. Givat Binyamin. So there are 3 places. Most of them, or all of them, are in Binyamin, very close to each other. So Shaul is concentrating the troops around his palace or kingdom, and the rest of the people are going back home. It may be a trick here. How do you say when you want to deceive the enemy, not the enemy understand, make the enemy not understanding what you are doing, like tricking or deceive, like a deceive, deceive action of sending everybody home and keeping only the 3,000. Why? Because we still have the bigger enemy. The bigger enemy is the Plishtim. We say that in the time of Shmuel, Shmuel defeated the Plishtim and he sent them away from the towns. But we are going to see, and we saw already, that they weren't totally defeated, and with the time, they returned and they did took control of all the land of Israel in some way. So they were the government. So they let the Israelis have their own little army or have their own little king, but really the one who were controlling the land of Israel were the Plishtim. I want to jump a little bit to the end of the chapter just to read a few verses to let you understand what I'm talking about. I'm reading in verse 19. It says, no smith. Smith is the one who's working with iron, right? No smith was to be found in all the land of Israel. For the Plishtim were afraid that the Hebrews would make swords or spears. So what does it mean? They didn't want Am Israel to have a weapon, so they didn't let any smith to work in Israel. So what did the Jews do when they needed smiths? They went to the Plishtim and paid money. So all the Israelites had to go down. Why I say down? Because the Plishtim were near the beach, down. The Israelis were in the mountain, and the Plishtim were in the plain, near the coast. So all the Israelis had to go down to the Plishtim to have their plowshares, their mattocks, axes, and coulters sharpened. The charge for sharpens was a pim. Pim apparently is 2/3 of a shekel. For plowshares, mattocks, three-pronged forks, and three-pronged forks is what you use to take all the straw, right? And axes, and for setting the goads. Thus, on the day of the battle, no sword or spear was to be found in the possession of any of the troops of Shaul and Jonathan. Only Shaul and Jonathan had them. So, what we can see from these verses, that the Plishtim controlled the land of Israel, basically, or militarily. Maybe they didn't control every moment of their lives. They didn't have, I don't know, the courts and the control of everything that was going, but militarily aspect, they were totally in control of Eretz Israel. They didn't let. So the question here, how Am Israel had weapon to have a war against Ammon? What does it mean? We saw that Am Israel defeated Nachash, the king of Ammon, in the last chapter or 2 chapters ago. So what if they didn't have any sword and any spear? How could they go to a war against Ammon? Radak answers this question saying that most of the war in the old times were by arrows, usually made by wood, and rocks, like David HaMelech killed Goliath, right, with stones, with rocks. So there were ways to have a battle, to have a war, but usually you need at least some swords and some spears. We are going to answer a little bit more later, but what I'm trying to say right now is that even though Shaul was a king, even though there was the army, and even though there was a first victory against Ammon, the situation was that Am Israel was under the control of the Plishtim. Right? And now Shaul has to resolve this problem. This was the main purpose of calling to Shaul to be a king. Another thing that looks strange that we read before, when Shmuel gave the orders, the instructions to Shaul, what you are going to do before being a king, he gave him several, you are going to meet this person and this person, he's going to ask you, you're going to answer, all the things that we saw. There was one thing that we didn't see that really happened. He said, later, you are going to Gilgal, and you will wait for me 7 days. Don't do anything before I come. This we didn't see happening. And this is going to happen in this chapter. So apparently, I'm saying one interpretation, there are other opinions. There was like a deceive action of Shaul and Jonathan. They were going to go to a war against the Plishtim, but they didn't want the Plishtim to understand. So they sent everybody home. They left only the 3 best soldiers with them, concentrated around the center of his kingdom in the mountain of Binyamin, right, north of Jerusalem, in the mountains north of Jerusalem. So that's what he says. Shaul picked 3,000 best soldiers, right, Israelites, 2,000 with him, 1,000 with Jonathan. There is here a point. Who is Jonathan? His son. I said that before, but it doesn't say in this verse. It's the first time we see this name. Usually, the Tanakh say very clearly, he is the son of that. He is Jonathan ben Shaul. Now, it doesn't say anything here. And it's a question I'm not, again, I don't have a good answer for that. Why? Later on, it says Jonathan was a son of Shaul. But here you just mentioned Jonathan like we know who is it. But we don't. We only know because we know what happened later. We now can assume that Jonathan was one of the commandments of commanders of Shaul. Shaul has 2,000 and Jonathan has 2,000. The rest of the troops he sent back to their homes. Jonathan struck down the Plishti perfect in Geva. So the Plishtim had their army in Geva. We already saw that when Shaul was sent to his home after meeting Shmuel, he told him, you are going to see that and that where the Plishtim left their army. Their perfect meaning like you put in the troops to control a zone, to have the security of the zone. So there was troops of the Plishtim in Geva. Geva, it's not Giv'ah, but all of them are in the same zone in Binyamin. And Jonathan attacked him. It was planned by Jonathan and Shaul or not? This here, when we have the differences of opinion that I mentioned before. Malbim, for example, says that Jonathan didn't ask his father. He just did that. He just suddenly, so all of that wasn't planned. Am Israel, Shaul didn't plan to go to a war against the Plishtim. Jonathan was the one who's doing that. He was, I don't know, very brave or very, I would say, not very clever to start a war against a very strong nation. But Jonathan did that by his own decision. This is one explanation. The other explanation, like I said before, that all of that was planned from before. So Shaul sent everybody home so the Plishtim would be calm. And then Jonathan starts a revolt against the Plishtim. He's striking them. He has 1,000 people with him, attacking the prefect of the Plishtim. Prefect? How do you say prefect? Prefect of the Plishtim, and starting a war. And this was like the excuse for Shaul to calling back the people. So and the Plishtim heard about it, and of course they were very angry, and they said, okay, we're going to a war against the Jews. Shaul had the ram's horn sounded throughout the land, saying, let the Hebrews hear. Everybody should hear about what's going on, what's happening. So when all Israel heard that Shaul had struck down the Plishtim prefect, who struck down the Plishtim prefect? We say Jonathan. Why is saying here Shaul? Because for the Plishtim, it's the same. If your son doing that, it's you doing that. So for Am Israel, for national matters or public matters, Shaul start a war against the Plishtim. That's what everybody knows. So the Plishtim knows that, understands that, and it doesn't matter who was the one who was hitting, and if it was in purpose or not was in purpose, what everybody knows is that Am Israel started a war against the Plishtim. Okay? So, and Israel has incurred the wrath of the Plishtim. All the people rallied to Shaul at Gilgal. So this is the Gilgal that we mentioned before. That Shmuel said, wait to me in the Gilgal. So if it's everybody was planned, it succeeded in that meaning that Am Israel is joined the effort. Okay, so Shaul starting a war, or Jonathan starting a war, and Am Israel is coming after Shaul to the Gilgal. But the place is very strange because we said Shaul was in Michmash and Jonathan was in Giv'ah. If maybe I don't know. Again, try to imagine the map of Israel. We have all the mountain in the middle and Jerusalem in the middle of the mountain. So we are talking all the places that we are mentioning here are north of Jerusalem. Like today in car, about half an hour driving to the north. Now, this is mountain. The Plishtim are in the coast. And they have few soldiers in the mountains that were attacked. So they're in the coast in the west side, right? This is the place of the Plishtim. Now, they have to go to the mountain. They are in a weaker stand, right? You always want to be in the mountain. And also, if you're thinking about going, for example, they used to have wars in the day, not in the night. You're going from the west to the east, the sun is against you, right? So Israel in the best situation, the best position is to stay on the mountain. Where is Gilgal? Gilgal in the other side of the mountain, in the plain part in the east. So instead of just keeping the best place, best position for the war, they are going to a lower position, which is much worse. Why? Why did they left Michmash and Giv'ah and went to Gilgal? Because of the orders of Shmuel. Shmuel said to Shaul, you will wait for me, not in Michmash, not in Giv'ah, not in Bethel, in Gilgal. So Shaul has to retreat and go to a lower place and the weaker place because of the order for Shmuel, which looks strange. Why would he do that? Some say, well, maybe you're going to back position in order to get power, right? But it's again, the geography doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense to go to a weaker position. Not only that, so after the beginning, let's say the success in the beginning, things are going worse and worse, right? First of all, he's losing his strategic position and go to the lower place. And then the Plishtim react. Let's see what's going to happen. The Plishtim in turn gathered to attack Israel. 30,000 chariots. Each chariot has 3 soldiers, at least. So we're talking about around 100,000 soldiers. And 6,000 riders and troops as numerous as the sands of the seashore. So we are talking maybe 200,000. I don't know. It's very hard to know exactly numbers. What it means, the sands of the seashore? Depends what seashore, right? There's some with a lot of rocks. Okay, but anyway, huge army. And what Shaul has? Well, he has these 3,000 troops and the people that came to him. But how many? So they marched up and encamped at Michmash, where before that Shaul was there, right? So Shaul left this place and all the Plishtim came to Michmash, east of Beit Aven. So how it's continue? When Israel side saw that they were in trouble, for the troops were hard pressed, the people hid in caves, among thorns, among rocks, in tunnels, and in cisterns. So not only the beginner success didn't continue, Am Israel is very afraid, and they are running away. So Shaul left with few people. And not only that, the next verse, some Hebrews crossed the Jordan to the territory of God and Gilad, meaning they ran away to the east. They don't want to stay with Shaul. And the rest of the people rallied to him in alarm. So they're telling him, okay, what we are doing now? Shaul, what we are doing? The word in Hebrew is not very clear. It says chardu acharav. Some say chardu were afraid. Some say were afraid and went away, and some say were afraid and told him, what we are doing? Let's start the war. What are you waiting for? The people are leaving us. The Plishtim are gathering powers. Why are you waiting? Why is he waiting? Because Shmuel told him. So Shmuel is like sabotaging, how do you say sabotage? Sabotaging all the war. Instead of just using this momentum, right? You struck the prefect of Plishtim. You have the people with you. Go directly to the war. No, he's waiting in the lower place. And they say Shaul was still at Gilgal, doing nothing. Okay, the people are running away, hiding, and he's doing nothing in Gilgal. And the people rallied in alarm. What we are doing? So he waited 7 days. The times that Shaul had set. Remember in the beginning, when he was named as a king, crowned as a king, Shmuel told him, you will wait for me in Gilgal 7 days. Wait for me. But when Shmuel failed to come to Gilgal, and the people began to scatter, Shaul became to be under stress. That was, of course, a test. We should understand the meaning of that test, but all of that situation, stressful situation, was a test to Shaul. Are you going to obey the word of the prophet, meaning the word of God? Or you're going to do things for yourself? Now, it's a little bit remind us what situation that we are waiting for someone, waiting, and there is a stress from the people. The scene of the golden calf, right? Moshe is away. Everybody is waiting to Moshe, and people start to be stressed. Where is our leader? Here, everybody is waiting for Shmuel. There, everybody is waiting for Moshe. And then they come into Aaron. We should do something. And Aaron also saying, okay, give me your gold. And Shaul, what is doing here? Shaul say, okay, we should start. Shaul say, bring me the burnt offering and the sacrifice of well-being, and he presented the burnt offering. So what does it mean, this offering? Before going to a war, to a battle, you should do the sacrifice. So that means that he didn't wait anymore. Shmuel told him, don't do anything before I come, and he started to do something. He started offering. Now, here it's interesting. He told them, bring me the olah and the shlamim, the burnt offering and the sacrifice here of well-being. And he could do only the first one, and then Shaul arrived. And he just finished presenting the burnt offering when Shmuel arrived. Meaning, if he had waited a little bit more, I don't know, a few minutes more, Shmuel were already there. But he didn't. And that was a big mistake of Shaul. Okay? So after doing what he didn't have to do, and Shaul went out to meet him and welcome him. And Shmuel arrived, and Shaul went out to meet him and welcomed him. So, but Shmuel said, what have you done? Shaul replied, I saw the people leaving me and scattering. You had not come at the appointed time, and the Plishtim is gathered at Michmash. 3 parts to the answer, all saying the same. I was in a very stressed situation. But he's also blaming the people. The people were going away. He's blaming Shmuel, you didn't come. And then he explained, and the Plishtim were gathering. So blaming others, it's not a good answer, no time, right? Never. But here it's also showing that he was weak, right? In some point. But still, the situation explained everything, right? What did you expect? People are leaving him, he's in the war. You don't want to rely on the miracle, right? Usually we say you should resolve your own problems. You don't want to rely on the miracle. So, okay, so he failed to wait to Shmuel. Was it so severe? Was it so bad? Let's see what was the reaction of Hashem, of Shmuel. I thought the Plishtim would march down against me at Gilgal before I had entreated God. So I forced myself to present the burnt offering. So that was his excuses. He also entering here the religious explanation. I was afraid that they will start the war and I didn't do the sacrifice. I know that I must do the sacrifice before going to the war, so I did that. So he's also adding the religion argument. So the answer of Shmuel is very, very, very harsh. Shmuel answered Shaul, you act foolishly in not keeping the commandment that the eternal your God laid upon you. Otherwise, God would establish your dynasty over Israel forever. But now it's not going to happen. But now your dynasty will not endure. God will seek out a man with a more willing heart, and God will appoint him ruler over his covenanted people because you did not abide by what God had commanded you. Okay, so the decree, the punishment is very, very severe. It looks like without that, Shaul would have been the king forever, or him and in his children. And because of that, because of this, that he didn't wait another 5 minutes or half an hour, he was punished to lose his kingdom. It looked like, again, the punishment looked very severe, very, very extreme for such a mistake, right? He didn't do idolatry. He didn't kill people. He didn't, I don't know, rape someone. He just didn't wait half an hour. Disobey direct order of the prophet. That's true. But why was it so important? Just let's see what's happened. I will read it until the end of the chapter, but we will answer most of the question next time, Zat Hashem. So Shmuel arose and went up from Gilgal to Gibeah of Binyamin. So he went, the Plishtim were in Michmash, he was in Gilgal, he went a little bit more south to Gibeah, where Jonathan was in the beginning. Shaul numbered the troops who remained with him about 600 strong. It doesn't say strong, it say people, around 600 people. So not only the people that came to join him ran away, the 3,000 best troops also ran away, only 600 people. So he saw all of that happening. Again, to explain why he didn't wait. It makes sense. Only 600 people stayed with him. Maybe another 1,000 with Shaul, with Binyamin, Yonatan, but it looks like no, everybody together were 600 people. Shaul and his son, this is the first time it says that he was his son, and his son Jonathan and the troops who remained with them stayed in Geva of Binyamin, while the Plishtim were encamped at Michmash, very close to each other. Again, today it's a car about 15 minutes, 10 minutes. And the war starts. The riders came out of Plishtim camps in 3 columns. If you remember, in the war against Ammon, Shaul also came with 3 columns. It always was a tactics to go in 3 directions, to leave 1 direction to run away. So the same like Shaul did last time. This time the Plishtim are the people that attack, and they are going with 3 columns. You say columns. 1 column headed for the Ofra road. All these places today, they are settlements in Israel. There is a place called Ofra, place called Geva Binyamin, place called Michmash. All these places are today we have not cities, villages like that. 1 column headed to the Ofra for the Ofra road, and that leads to the district of Shual. Another column headed for the Bet Horon road, and the 3rd column headed for the border road that overlooks the valley of Tzvoim towards the desert. So the places, if we have map, we could see how it goes to attack Geva from 3 sides. And now the verses that we saw before that explain further why Shaul was so worried. No meat was to be found in the land of Israel, for the Plishtim were afraid that the Hebrews would make swords or spears. So all the Israelites had to go down to the Plishtim to have their plowshares, their mattocks, axes, and coulters sharpened. The charge for sharpening was a pim, for plowshares, mattocks, 3-pronged forks and axes, and for setting the goads. So, on the day of the battle, no swords or spear was to be found in the possession of any of the troops with Shaul and Jonathan. So we can say, the question I asked before, only Shaul and Jonathan had them. How did they go to the war against Ammon if they didn't have any kind of weapon? So one of the answer, it says, no sword or spear was to be found in the possession of whom? Of those who stayed with Shaul. Meaning all the people that had sword ran away. So there were more people with sword, only a few, meaning that the Plishtim, with the time, made sure that there was no any sword. So always there was sword from before, but very few. And the people that had them, they ran away when everything started to be problematic. So this is another possibility. And then now the Plishtim garrison had marched out to the pass of Michmash. Okay, so, and what's happening in the war, we're going to see in the next chapter. I'm just want to again, so our main question here is, okay, you can see the situation, right? Shaul has 600 people, is waiting 7 days in a place that he shouldn't be, like strategically, it shouldn't go there, and he's obeying Shmuel until the last moment, missing for half an hour. So why did Shmuel told him to do that? Why did Hashem told him to do that? Why didn't Hashem just told him, go to a war the best way you can? Why gather all your troops, gather all your power and go to a war? Why to make him in a situation when he's so weak, when he must rely on a miracle? In this moment, he must rely on a miracle, which usually we say you shouldn't do so. And so this is the first question, why to put him in this situation? The second question, even if it's a kind of a test for some reason, why the punishment is so severe? Why is losing his kingdom because of that? Now, I want to add another question, just to add a question that we are going to answer next week with Hashem. It looks here that without this mistake of Shaul, he would have been king forever. This contradicts him and his sons and his destiny, right? We're going to be the king forever. This contradicts the blessing of Yaakov to Yehuda. And the tradition that the one who's going to be the king, the kingdom of Israel should become coming from Yehuda. And Shaul is from Binyamin. So hadn't Shaul sinned, or if Shaul hadn't sinned, Yehuda wouldn't be the king? I mean, it says, לא יסור שבט מיהודה ומחוקק מבין רגליו, עד כי יבוא שילה ולא יכחת אמין. So that was the bracha of Yaakov to Yehuda, that the kingdom would come from Yehuda. So again, it looks like a contradiction. Was the kingdom of Shaul destined to be forever before the sin? Or from the beginning, it was only temporal? If it from the beginning was temporal, it's against the verse that says here that Shmuel said to Shaul, Hashem meant to make you a king forever. Remember that we saw that here in verse 13. Shmuel said, Shaul, you act foolishly, etc. And it says, otherwise God would have established your dynasty over Israel forever. Right? So it looks like it was planned to be forever. It's against what we know, that the kingdom should have been from Yehuda, from the kingdom of David. Okay, so we will leave this question, B'ezrat Hashem, for the next time. Shkoyach.